know, in times of earthquake, it's the buildings of the Incas that survive rather than the buildings that were built 10 years ago.
Machu Picchu has captivated the world since 1911, but the biggest secret is hidden in plain sight. The way the ancient stones fit together is so perfect it feels fake. We are talking about massive rocks with dozens of angles fitting into each other like they were made in a factory.
Without iron tools, to actually shape these huge blocks is just amazing.
I'm not gonna lie, the truth about who really built this might change everything. Some parts of the city are so advanced they make the rest look like amateur work. It is time to dive into the secrets of the stones that should be impossible to move. Mountain jigsaw masterpieces. For starters, hands down, the most confusing part is how many angles these stones have. Most people are used to square bricks, but the builders here did not like squares. They carved stones into crazy shapes with 10, 20, or even 30 different angles. Imagine a jigsaw puzzle where every piece is a heavy rock and every side has to match perfectly with the rock next to it. These are three-dimensional shapes that lock together in every direction. Modern workers who use power tools and computers say they would have a hard time copying this work today. They would need diamond-tipped saws to get the same smooth finish. Yet the people who lived here supposedly only had stone hammers and bronze chisels. This creates a huge gap between what we think they had and what we actually see on the mountain. The usual story says the Inca people built this city around the year 1450. They worked for the emperor named Pachacuti. The story says they were just really patient and used stone tools to slowly tap away at the granite until it fit. Granite is one of the hardest rocks on Earth. It is way harder than the bronze tools the Inca used. Trying to cut granite with a bronze chisel is like trying to cut a thick steak with a plastic spoon. The spoon is going to break or bend before the meat even gets a scratch. This is why engineers are so confused. When you look at places like the Temple of the Three Windows, you see massive blocks that look like they were cut with a laser. The surfaces are flat and smooth, and they stay that way for over 3 feet of length. Things get even crazier when you look at the stones with dozens of faces. Every time you add a new angle to a stone, you make the job 10 times harder. You have to make sure that new side matches the stone next to it, the one above it, and the one behind it. If you mess up even a tiny bit, the whole wall will not fit. This means you cannot just carve one stone and hope for the best. You have to know the exact shape of every stone around it before you even start. This takes a level of planning that is hard to imagine for a culture that did not have paper or computers. They were doing complex math in their heads while moving 50-ton rocks on a steep mountain. Wait until you hear how they actually moved these giant rocks across the ridges. Steel strength without metal. Moving a 50-ton rock is a nightmare today, even with big cranes. At Machu Picchu, the rocks came from a quarry right on the site, but they still had to be moved up and down steep slopes. The ground is not flat and there is not much room to move. The Inca did not use wheels, so they had to drag these stones on wooden rollers or sleds. But the mountain is so steep that one wrong move would send the stone flying down into the river thousands of feet below. Basically, the risk of losing a year's worth of work was happening every single day. They had to organize hundreds of people to pull ropes and keep the stones steady as they moved them into place. Once the stone got to the wall, the real work began. The trial and error method is what most books talk about. This means they would put the stone in place, see where it hit the other stones, take it off, grind it down, and put it back. They would do this over and over until it fit. But think about doing that with a rock that weighs as much as a school bus. You would have to lift it up and down hundreds of times for just one stone. That's putting it lightly, because doing this for thousands of stones would take forever. Some experts think they used models made of clay or wood instead. They would make a small version of the stone, make sure it fit the model, and then copy it onto the big rock. This would save time, but it still requires a level of carving skill that is off the charts. Granite has a hardness of about 6 or 7 on the special scale scientists use. Bronze is only about a 3 or 4. This means bronze is much softer. If you hit granite with a bronze tool, the tool gets flat, but the granite stays the same. The only way to really shape granite without power tools is to use another rock that is even harder. They would use river stones to hit the granite over and over. This is called pecking. It works, but it is incredibly slow. It would take thousands of hours just to make one side of a big stone flat. And yet the walls at Machu Picchu are not just flat, they are often polished until they shine. This means they had to spend even more time rubbing the stones with sand and water to get that smooth finish. What most people don't realize is that the timeline they give us is very short. They say the city was built in only 20 years. If you count all the stones that were carved and fitted perfectly, 20 years does not seem like enough time. Even with thousands of workers, the math does not add up. You can only fit so many people around one stone at a time. It is not like you can have 1,000 people all hitting the same rock. This has led some researchers to think that the most amazing parts of the city were already there when the Inca arrived. They think the Inca found the foundations and built on top of them rather than starting from zero. The quality of the work actually changes the further up the walls you look. Ancient builders left clues. If you walk through Machu Picchu and look closely at the walls, you will notice something very strange. The stones at the bottom are usually the biggest and the most perfectly fitted. These are the ones that look like a jigsaw puzzle, but as you look higher up, the stones get smaller and the gaps between them get bigger. In the top parts of the walls, the Inca used mortar and smaller, rougher stones. This is the opposite of how things usually work. Usually, as a civilization gets older, it gets better at building things. But here, the oldest work is the best and the newer work is not as good. Things get even crazier when you realize this pattern is all over Peru. At places like Cusco and Sacsayhuaman, you see the same thing. Huge, impossible stones at the bottom and smaller, simpler stones on top. This suggests that the Inca might have inherited the city. They were great builders, but they might not have been the ones who made the most advanced parts. Even the Inca told the Spanish explorers that they did not build everything. They said a group called the First People, or the servants of a god named Viracocha, built the giant walls long ago. Most historians ignored this and called it a myth, but the stones seem to prove the stories were true. It's been missing for years, but the evidence of an older culture is right there. If there was an older culture that could work with stone this well, it would change our whole view of history. It would mean that thousands of years ago, people had technology or skills that we don't fully understand. Maybe they didn't have machines, but they had a different way of looking at nature. Some people think they used sound or heat to shape the rocks, though we haven't found proof of that yet. So here's the deal with why the dating of the city is so tricky. We use carbon dating to find out how old a site is. But carbon dating only works on things that were once alive, like wood or bone. You cannot carbon date a rock. We can tell when a fire was built near the rock, but we can't tell when the rock was carved. The Inca were definitely at Machu Picchu around 1450 because we found their trash and their tools. But that doesn't mean they carved the giant granite blocks. They could have moved into an empty city and started fixing it up. They were masters of organization and farming, so they added the terraces and the smaller houses. But the temples, like the Temple of the Sun, have stonework that is just too good for the tools they had. Everyone's obsessed with the Inca, but we might be missing the real builders. If a much older group built the base, it explains why the work got worse over time. The later builders were trying to copy a skill they didn't fully have. The stones are not just pretty, they were built to survive the literal end of the world. Engineering against the earth. Machu Picchu is built on a spot that most modern engineers would stay away from. It sits right on top of two geological fault lines. This means the ground shakes a lot because of earthquakes. In a normal city, a big earthquake would knock down all the buildings. But at Machu Picchu, the buildings are still standing after 500 years. The secret is in the way the stones fit together. Because there is no mortar, the stones can actually move and dance during a shake. They jiggle around and then settle back into their original spots. I'm not gonna lie, it is one of the smartest ways to build a house ever. The way the stones are shaped also helps with the weight. Since they have so many angles, they lock together and prevent the walls from leaning or falling over. It is a mechanical lock that uses the weight of the mountain to hold itself together. But the builders didn't just worry about earthquakes, they also had to worry about rain. The Andes get huge amounts of rain, and on a steep ridge, that water could easily cause a landslide. To stop this, they built over 700 agricultural terraces. These are like giant stone steps that hold the soil in place, and that's putting it lightly because the terraces actually do much more than just grow food. Underneath the ground at Machu Picchu, there is a massive drainage system. The builders filled the terraces with layers of big rocks, then gravel, then sand, and finally topsoil. This works like a giant filter. When it rains, the water sinks into the ground instead of running off the side and taking the mountain with it. They also built stone channels that carry water safely away from the buildings. This level of environmental engineering is incredible. They understood how water moves and how to keep a city from sliding away. Whether the Inca figured this out or learned it from the people before them, it saved the city for centuries. The most famous stone at the site is the Intihuatana. This is a giant rock carved out of the mountain's bedrock. It has a tall pillar sticking up, and it was used as a solar clock or a calendar. On certain days of the year, the sun sits right over the pillar, and it casts no shadow. The precision of the carving on this solid piece of granite is mind-blowing. It wasn't moved there, it was shaped right where it sat. Modern stone carvers say that making those smooth, flat surfaces on bedrock is one of the hardest things you can do. Basically, the builders were showing off their skills in every single corner of the city. The city was built to last forever, but the people who lived there didn't stay long. Around the year 1530, everyone just left. Machu Picchu was abandoned, and for a long time, no one really knew why. It wasn't because of a war, because there are no signs of a fight. The buildings were left in good shape, and the people took most of their stuff with them. It seems like they walked away on purpose. One theory is that a disease like smallpox, which came from Europe, reached the city before the Spanish soldiers did. Since the people there had no protection against new germs, many might have passed away and the rest fled. The thing is, the city was so hidden that the Spanish never actually found it. How could people with such basic tools create something that modern technology still cannot perfectly copy today? If these stones were built by an older, lost culture, what else have we forgotten about our own history? Tell us what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more mysteries.